Hi everyone, I'm Bill Blymiller, and it's my pleasure today to be the worship associate and to help us through the service. For those of you who are here for the first time, enjoy yourself. I hope you hear something or feel something that resonates with you and makes you want to come back. Those of you who've been around a while, whether it's a month or a month of Sundays, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Today we get to have the Reverend Kathy Schmidt back again. Reverend Schmidt's a semi-retired, ordained Unitarian Universalist minister who has served churches in several states, and currently she and her husband Charlie Behrens are avid environmentalists living in Orlando and advocates for social justice, and oh my goodness, there's grandchildren to be visited too, so the schedule gets pretty tough for Reverend Kathy, but she's here and we appreciate that. Before we get there, let's center ourselves. We do that in our congregation with something called the stone ritual, and it involves us in concentrating on joys and sorrows and intentions. So I ask you to follow along as you wish. I'd like you to imagine that you've got 3 small pebbles in your hand, and before you is this endless beach, the perfect sand. And you're there to mark your passing from last week. And you take one of those stones out and you place it in the sand, and that's the stone for your joys. And set that one up straight. Make it look proud because you did that and you earned it. The next one is joy for your, for your stone for your sorrows of the last week. But push that down a little further in the sand. You did a lot of stuff on that. You earned that one too. And let some of that go. The last stone I'd like you to put in as a foundation stone for your good intentions of the next week. A place for you to start the building of your good intentions. The chalice is a more universal symbol of Unitarian Universalism, and all across the country, in the United States at least, UU churches light their chalices on Sunday mornings. A chalice, by the way, is not any one thing. This will serve as our chalice today, because it's not the size of the chalice, it's not the number of candles, it's not the number of anything, it's the light that's here symbolically. Let's do that with these words by Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf, and that's truly the name, his or her poem in faith. This is a congregation that gathers in faith. Not faith in one religion or one God or one anything. We gather in faith of the power of diversity, the power of love, and the hope of a world transformed by our care. We gather in faith in ourselves and in those around us, not a faith that requires perfection nor rightness in one another, rather a faith that in our shared imperfection we may learn to stumble and fall together. Faith that we will rise and help one another to rise again and to try again and again. We are Unitarian Universalists, and this is our faith. With our chalice lit, we're ready for our first hymn, and that is number 360, Here We Have Gathered, for those of you who took your books home. Be played by Miss Deborah Lynch.
Here we have gathered side by side, circle our kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matter small and great. We of all ages, women, children, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
Good morning. It's great to be with you again. I wanted to just make a comment about the hymn we just heard or sang, depending on whether you sang along. The tune comes from the 1500s, from a collection known as the Geneva Psalter. The Geneva Psalter was a collection of metric psalms put together by John Calvin to facilitate congregational singing. Now, 30 years ago, Unitarian Universalist singer and songwriter Alicia Carpenter wrote new words to this tune. The tune happens to be known as the Old 124th. But you may have noticed that the words, rather than lifting up praise or lament to a source outside of ourselves, speaks to how we come together in community. The words, may all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. In our non-creedal tradition, the manner in which we gather matters. It matters deeply. So with that in mind, today I'd like to talk to you about giraffes. Long ago, I can't remember when or where giraffes became my favorite animals. Maybe you have a favorite animal. If so, I wonder if you know why it is your favorite animal. For a long time, people used to ask me why giraffes were my favorite animal, and I really didn't have much of a reason. I would usually say, because they're yellow, and yellow is my favorite color, which didn't really seem like a very good answer, especially since they really are only yellowish. Then a couple of years ago, I learned something about giraffes. They have the largest hearts of any land mammal. Blue whales are the mammals with the largest hearts, and that's why I have to say that giraffes have the largest hearts of any land mammal. I learned about giraffes' hearts at a workshop where people were learning about kind ways to talk to each other. The workshop title was compassionate communication. So let's think about what those words mean. Lots of ways to talk about each of them, but compassionate, kind, or caring, right? And communication, talking and listening, writing and reading, media, all the ways we share our thoughts and our feelings with each other. Some of you may have heard of compassionate communication called nonviolent communication. It's a way of practicing talking with each other that's taught by a man named Marshall Rosenberg. When Dr. Rosenberg wanted an animal to be the symbol of compassionate communication, he chose the giraffe. And this is what he said. The giraffe has the largest heart of any land mammal. The giraffe is tall enough to look into the future and lives its life with gentility and strength. It is gentle and strong at the same time. So I wonder if any of you know what sound a giraffe makes. I have visited many giraffes in a zoo, and I have never heard them make a sound other than perhaps the munching sound of leaves. But I guess they can make some grunting sounds and also some noises that people can't hear. They're too low for our auditory range. But the thing is that they're not really known for their noises, are they? But if, for humans, giraffes are a symbol of compassionate communication, what would it sound like for us to speak giraffe? In other words, what is kind talking and what does it sound like? So we know some of the things, right? Please and thank you, you're welcome. A gentle tone of voice, not yelling, asking for something rather than demanding. So here, we'll start with a simple question. Which of these is giraffe speak? Give me your toy, or may I use your toy? Okay, let's up the game a little. The board is stupid and trying to destroy the congregation. Or, I have some concerns about the recent board decision. Now, I know nothing about what's been going on with your board. That was a generic example. So if I hit a nerve, I'm sorry. But good manners, they help us, letting people know that we hear them and that we understand them. So now when people want to know why I like giraffes, I say because they have the biggest heart of any land mammals. They're gentle and strong at the same time, and they're yellowish. This morning, I would like to share with you a meditation that was shared by my colleague, Rika Kalfo, who is originally from Germany and now serves one of our congregations in California. So I invite you to join me in a spirit of meditation, reflection, or if you like, prayer. Spirit of life, during these tumultuous and scary times, give us comfort and hold us in love. Hold in love all those who are affected by violence and oppression in all the different places around the world, in conflicts known and unknown to us, new or ongoing for unimaginable lengths of time. Hold in love those in danger, forced to flee, cold and scared, stuck on their journey into uncertainty. Hold in love those who are startled and unsettled by the sensation of turning on the news and seeing people being under attack who look just like them. Hold in love those for whom the sensation of seeing people who look just like them being brutalized is an ongoing reality with them on most days, like the chronic, dull pain that never leaves. Hold in love those who in their shock mobilize to help, who show care and meet the situation with incredible generosity. Hold and love those who can't help but feeling stumped, witnessing this care, this generosity, this global response that is suddenly happening when it wasn't there before. Hold and love all the children who long for safety, the mothers who cry in their inability to protect them, and the fathers who bid their families goodbye, not knowing if they will ever see them again. Hold them in love, regardless if we see their faces on the news or not. In every unraveling, there is an unveiling. And in every unveiling, there is the possibility of repairing, rebuilding, and reinventing. Hold us in love as we reinvent the world together. May it be so, and blessed be. Let us take a moment in shared silence before our musical meditation.
To see our world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower, holding infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour.
To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour.
To see our world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour.
Why are you good, even when no one is watching? I don't mean to imply that you're good all the time. Don't worry, I already know. But lots of times, when you know you could get away with something, you choose to do the right thing. Why? There's a conversation I've had on more than one occasion when trying to explain Unitarian Universalism. You see, I generally try to define Unitarian Universalism by what we are, rather than by what we are not. Still, it sometimes comes up that the threat of hell is not in our toolbox. This actually came up as we were talking before the service today. And that's when it happens. The person I'm talking to you exclaims, "What? You don't believe in hell? If I didn't believe in hell, I could do anything I want. How can you not believe in hell?" By which I think they mean, how will we order and control society if we don't have the threat of hell to keep people in line? Why are you good even when no one is watching? Why are you good when God isn't watching? Or when God is watching but has no hell to which to send you? Or when there is no God to do the watching? Why are you good? My answers never seem to satisfy the people who need hell, because it's the right thing to do, because I find everything works better that way, because I feel good when I do good, because I want to live in a world where people choose to do the right thing and I'm just doing my part. Some people aren't convinced, and I find myself quietly thinking, okay, then, if it takes hell to help you be good, you just go right on believing in hell. 11 years ago, when I was writing the original sermon on which my remarks today are based, I happened to attend a wonderful interfaith celebration of the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The theme address took its title from an MLK quote: "The time is always right to do the right thing. The time is always right to do the right thing." The address called on us to do the right thing by taking action on the many pressing issues of our day. And I was in hearty agreement with the points raised. But I was more impressed by the context of the address. 25 of us from First Unitarian Orlando had gathered with several hundred others at City Hall. As a group, we walked across Division Street, so named because it did in fact once divide Black Orlando from white Orlando. We made our way to a Black Baptist church for a service organized by a rabbi, at which the main speaker was an imam. There was something I want to say enchanting about the whole thing. It renewed my faith that people really can come together and understand that the time is always right to do the right thing. The sanctuary had a very welcoming feel as we entered, but I left with an unexpected challenge. As we waited for the service to begin, I noticed posters prominently displaying 4 spiritual principles that excluded many of the event's participants, including most UUs, excluded them from both salvation and God's love. Now, I'm a great believer in theological translation, and I think I'm good at it, but this list was a challenge for me. Let me just share it for you. God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life. Humanity is tainted by sin and therefore separated from God. As a result, we cannot know God's wonderful plan for our lives. Jesus Christ is God's only provision for our sin. Through Jesus Christ, we can have our sins forgiven and restore a right relationship with God. We must place our faith in Jesus Christ as Savior in order to receive the gift of salvation and know God's wonderful plan for our lives. Well, I thought, I'm in trouble. But rather than feel annoyed or dismissive, which I might have, I decided that someday down the road, I would challenge myself to preach a sermon on those principles, translating them somehow to something that can have meaning to Unitarian Universalists, even atheist Unitarian Universalists. But for me, at that time, doing the right thing meant resisting the temptation to build walls. It meant looking for a bridge or maybe building one. It meant staying open to the possibility of finding common ground with these others, different from me, but who are also inspired by Dr. King's legacy. And even more, I believed that there is something in the list that helps the people of that congregation do good and be good. And I wanted to challenge myself to understand what that is and how it works. Well, it's been 11 years, and I never did write that sermon. But if I did, I think I would say something like this. Love can be a powerful force in your life. And humans have lots of unfortunate ways to lose track of love. Nurturing hope is one of the ways to keep track of love. When we have hope, we can get back on track and enjoy the power of love in our lives. Therefore, let us renew our faith in the power of hope and love. I'm not sure the good people at that church would appreciate my rewording of their creed. And honestly, I'm not expecting them to. The purpose of my translation is that I'm trying to understand for myself what helps them to be their best selves. Now, earlier, I was talking about how a giraffe, a symbol of compassionate communication, might speak, which leads me to ponder the question of manners. I came across some writing from a church consultant named Gil Rendell. I've read a lot of Gil's work. He was writing in 1998, before the subsequent downhill slide in how we talk to each other in our culture. But even then, 25 years ago, he was reflecting on the demise of civility in our culture as a lack of manners. It's hard to imagine what he would think about where we've gotten to today. Rendell writes, a philosopher and former university president was both accurate and helpful when he identified this demise of civility in our society as a lack of manners. But he was clear to point out that manners are about more than polite behaviors. Quoting John Fletcher Moulton, he identified 3 domains of human interaction. 3 domains of human interaction. So 75 years ago, and so I actually looked up where this quote comes from, and it comes from the early 1900s, so over 100 years ago. Lord Moulton, a noted English judge, spoke on the subject of laws and manners. He divided human action into 3 domains. The first is the domain of law, where, he said, our actions are prescribed by laws binding us, upon which we must be obeyed. Laws which must be obeyed. Continuing, at the other extreme is the domain of free choice, which he said includes all of those actions as to which we claim and enjoy complete freedom. Laws, freedom. In between, Lord Moulton identified a domain in which our action is not determined by law, but in which we are not free to behave in any way we choose. Lord Moulton considered the area of action lying between the law and pure personal choice and preference to be the domain of obedience to the unenforceable. The domain of obedience to the unenforceable. In this domain, he said, obedience is the obedience of a person to that which they cannot be forced to obey. They are the enforcer of the law upon themselves. The domain between law and free choice, he called the law of manners. While it may include moral duty, social responsibility, and proper behavior, it extends beyond them all to cover all cases of doing right. All cases of doing right where there is no one to make you do it but yourself. I think obedience to the unenforceable is a great phrase. Some of us I know shiver at the word obedience, as it's a bit too much of it was required of us in our earlier years. And yet for me, and I suspect many of you, not much of my time is spent being constrained by law. I'm not continually tempted to do things that are against the law, nor do I spend a lot of time feeling I can do anything, that there are no restrictions on me. My choices and actions often, always maybe, exist within a context. So most of the time I am my own enforcer. It is me who chooses obedience to the unenforceable. What I will do is influenced by many factors, including the impact I might have on those around me, total strangers, on communities, on the earth. My choices are influenced by my desire to be in right relationship with others. What about you? What influences your choices and your actions? For me, sometimes my own internal compass helps me decide. Sometimes the understandings and promises I have with others directs me. The word in Unitarian Universalist circles for these kinds of understandings and promises is covenant. There are all kinds of covenants. Congregations have covenants. Some boards and committees and small groups have covenants. The congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association have a covenant. In the preamble to our Unitarian Universalist Association, right before the principles that we know so well, the words are, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote." And then come the principles. Now, it's important to remember that covenants are different from contracts. Contracts are protective. They say, if you do this, here's what will happen. If you don't do that, these other things will happen. They are in the domain of law that Lord Moulton talked about. A covenant is not a contract. Say that again. A covenant is not a contract. Rather than being protective, a covenant is about possibilities. It says, how can I help you be all you can be? And how can you help me do the same? Covenants, I think, reside more comfortably in that broad category that Lord Moulton called the domain of manners. One of the best examples of covenant that I know is marriage. The equal marriage struggle over the last 2 decades has made us aware that there are over 1,000 rights and responsibilities that come implicitly with marriage, embedded in our legal system. Most of us are not focused on those as we plan our weddings. These rights and responsibilities gained attention when we had folks who could not access them, as was previously the case with same-sex couples. For many people, the presence of those rights and responsibilities are overshadowed by the vows taken in a marriage ceremony. The vows represent a covenant. They are about promises and hopes and dreams. You know, when I help couples plan their weddings, I give them a number of samples of vows for consideration. And here's the way one really popular one reads. I, so-and-so, choose you. In the presence of this community, I promise to love you, to remain honest and faithful to you, to be available for you when you are in pain or grief, and when you are filled with happiness. I promise to challenge you always, to support and nurture you, and to be receptive to the gift of your love. I love you with all of my heart, and I will love you the rest of my life. These vows are not generally enforced by law, but for couples whose wedding includes a marriage certificate, those other 1,000 or so rights and responsibilities will be. But ultimately, we see the covenant as the spiritually significant component of a marriage. It allows people to come together in ways that makes them more than either of them could be alone. It does not protect them, but rather at its best, it calls them continually to their best selves. Having a covenant is one way to get everyone on the same page in terms of what people can expect when they come into a relationship or into a group. That's why they are used in congregational settings and committees and small groups. Covenants help to create an environment in which people are called to their best selves and reminded to be their best selves. It helps everyone know what is hoped for in a group, whatever the group is or the relationship is. It helps them to know what they can expect if they choose to be part of it. Covenants express our faith in each other. While a contract can be used as a weapon, a covenant never should be. A covenant is aspirational. It's about what we hope for. It's about a place we're going, we're trying to live into each day. We don't say, you weren't loving toward me today, you broke the covenant, you are bad. Well, actually, we do say that. It's just not helpful. At its best, the covenant is an invitation to look at our own behavior and see where our own commitment to the covenant can cause us to stay engaged, right? To stay engaged when it's hard, rather than turning away from difficult conversations and such difficult encounters. How can our living of the covenant help us to encourage our friend or loved one back into covenant and into right relationship? There's a tendency in some circles to talk about creating safe space. For a long time, I used that language too. Then I heard a compelling argument against promising people safe space. It was suggested that too safe a space could banish the challenges that make life interesting, that prompt growth in us, that keep us alive. It was suggested instead that we strive for supportive environments rather than trying to keep people safe, rather than shielding people from all of life's difficulty. Instead, we make sure people are supported, that whether they choose to embrace a challenge or challenge simply shows up and demands their attention, they will be able to rise to the occasion and experience the gift of new growth. Going back to the wedding vow I quoted, I think one of the reasons this set of vows is chosen so often is because of the lines, I promise to challenge you always, to support and nurture you. There's often a snicker from those gathered at the promise to challenge. After love, I would predict that it is one of the few words anybody remembers from the ceremony. I think that this might make a nice model for many of our relationships. What if in congregational life we said, I promise to love you. I promise to challenge you always, to support and nurture you. We come together not because of doctrine, but because of covenants, often unspoken. In deciding to be part of a congregation, we are freely choosing to bring ourselves into relationship with other people. We are increasing our opportunity to understand deeply and to live into that domain described as the obedience of the unenforceable. Obedience of the unenforceable. Here in our communities, in this supportive community, we have the opportunity to become better humans, to do good and to be good, to create stronger community. And then we have the opportunity to take what we have found out into our lives and into the wider community, and there to become a blessing to the world. May it be so. Our closing hymn is number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
Love will guide us, peace has dried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can hear from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has dried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Thank you, Kathy, for that very interesting and thought-provoking service. And Dee, thank you for the music again. And thanks to that dedicated band of optimists that put these services together every week. Thank you. We end the service by extinguishing our chalice. And we commemorate that with these words from Hosea Ballou, an early Universalist minister who, a circuit rider, as best I recall. His poem is called If We Agree in Love. If we agree in love, there is no disagreement that can do us any injury, but if we do not, no other agreement can do us any good. Let us endeavor to keep the unity of spirit in the bonds of peace. Now here I would normally say, go in peace, but before you go in peace, we have plate passing that has to be done virtually now, so donations for not only the church, but also for the charities that we support. You can do that at uutampa.org, and you'll look for the donate button. It's very tasteful down at the bottom. It's classy folks that we are. Thank you for joining us, and please stay online for the virtual coffee hour, which will be right here on this same channel, same station, right after the service. And thank you for joining us today.